This week, episode 253, we interview Spence Drake from White Hat Distribution and White Hat Cigars. The Stogie Geeks section, we're going to talk about some of the grassroots rituals and some of the grassroots cigars that we started out with. And judging by the tenure of co-host this week, Joe D, and me, some of the cigars he began with, mine are going to go a little bit, couple years back. And then we'll have the Stogies of the Week.
This is a Security Weekly production. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where cigars burn slow, ashes fall fast, and cocktails flow steady. It's the Stogie Geeks Show. Hat tip, can we play that?
Yeah, one more time.
Can I hear a...
Yes!
Yeah.
Enjoy the dirt.
Guests and friends here in studio, including a regular cast of characters, Mr. Joe Hollywood to my right.
How are you?
That's awesome. Joe D's here. Rain Man's here. What's going on, Joe D?
Roundtable discussions.
Havana Cigar Club, located in Warwick, Rhode Island, is a great place to enjoy a drink and a cigar. Stogie Geeks listeners can find a $5 off coupon on our website by clicking the HCC logo.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 253 of Stogie Geeks. I am your host this week, Joe Hozempa. We got a fast-paced show planned for you today. Our first segment, we are going to interview Spence Drake of White Hat Distribution. Spence, fascinating resume within the cigar world. He previously served as a national sales manager for AJ Fernandez. Was vice president of Cubanacan Cigars, and more recently, he is now the national sales director for Cornelius and Anthony Cigars. I also have joining me Joe D. How are you, sir?
What's up, brother? Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be a good show. Spence, how's everything going? Can you hear us?
Yeah, everything's going well, man.
Good, good.
Well.
I ran into you, a couple months back, in the cigar, our cigar paths had crossed, and I noticed that you haven't been on the show in a while, so I wanted the chance to interview you. So I thank you for that. You know,
No, sure.
Let us know geographically, where are you? What are you up to? What's going on with White Hat?
In Houston, Texas, we do all our distribution out of here in Houston. Just got back from Esteli. I was in Esteli last week prior to Thanksgiving holidays, and then came back home. And today's been busy, just filling orders from everything that came in during the Thanksgiving week when we weren't able to get shipping out.
Yeah, it was kind of it was definitely a weird week. It was a 2.5 day work week. Very tough to cram 5 days worth of stuff into a 2.5 day work week. So I can definitely sympathize with you with that. How was Thanksgiving? Good?
It was good, man. You know,
Yeah.
the usual. Ate way too much. And
Yeah,
still paying for it.
That does happen, for sure. So White Hat, has there been any changes with you and White Hat and currently let the Stogie Geek listener know, what you guys are all about? Especially, we are currently smoking the HR. It's the brown label. So is that the signature series?
Yeah, the HR Signature Toro.
Yep. Thank you for sending them. Really appreciate that.
Great stick, man.
Oh, you bet.
It's a good stick.
Glad they got there on time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So White Hat Distribution, we exclusively distribute product, HR product that's made in the La Corona factory. We'll have another product or two actually hitting the market in the beginning of next year, in the first quarter of next year. Stuff that we already had in the market previously, but we had pulled it, and we'll get it back into the market in the first quarter. Mm-hmm. Some of which will be packaged differently than it was before. Actually, all of it will. We're going to be relaunching Cineros, which is kind of the pet project of Omar Gonzalez Alaman from La Corona, who manufactures everything that we distribute. And Omar and the Robinas go way back to days in Cuba when Omar used to run the La Corona factory in Cuba. And obviously the Robinas were running their family farm in the Pinar del Rio region of Cuba.
Mm-hmm. Any rationale? You've said something that's, to me, it's an automatic game changer off the bat. We plan to launch a product first quarter of next year versus some of the typical people that we interview always wait to IPCPR. Right? They always want to wait. They always want to wait. So I want to have a business conversation, right? Any rationale? I mean, I think it's great. You know, you can get some kickstart on sales.
Proactive, get out in front.
Yeah, you can get out in front of people and not come out when everybody else comes out. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the people that you sell to at IPCPR are going to see the product that we've launched in the first quarter of the year maybe as new product to them. So when we do a launch, so to speak, and again, this product has been in the market previously, so it's not something that's new, but the packaging is going to have changed. But it's product that's going to be ready, that was rolled some time ago, so it's got at least 6 months of age before it hits the market, and then we're kind of learning, and what we've learned is we don't want to grow too wide too fast. So we have some accounts, say 15 to 20% of our accounts are really active accounts that reorder on a regular basis and do really well with the product, and have helped support the growth of our brand. And so when we launch something in the first quarter of the year, we'll be focusing on those accounts to bring the product in and to help educate their consumers, whether they're online guys or whether they're just true brick and mortar stores. So we'll focus on them first, and then hopefully by the time IPCPR rolls around, we have enough product to kind of go wider with it.
That makes sense. It's actually, it's good to take care of your existing clients, of course. Always a powerful business move. Work out, get some of the feedback, work that out, and then, when everybody else launches, at least you'll have a head start. Because
and we'll get to see how much product we're really gonna need to have in production, because one of the big issues that we've run into in the 2 years, or just short of 2 years that we've been doing this, is that we're getting back ordered too much, and the fault is mine for having my reps, encouraging my reps to be aggressive in terms of new account acquisition. And we had an issue. We launched the Blue Label and the Claro, which you guys got as well, at IPCPR in 2016. And it didn't really land due to some packaging issues and things until November or so of 2016. And in January of 2017, I gave like a sales incentive to my guys to really try to get some new account acquisition. And the timing was terrible, because we ended up with a number of reorders on the product that had landed in November. And then we had all these new accounts we had added. And before you knew it, we were back ordered on most of our best-selling product. And then we're waiting, because we age the hell out of everything. Most of the stuff that lands, all the signature stuff's got at least a year of it in the Escaparate in Nicaragua. The Blue Label requires about 6 months before we get it to market. The Claro a little bit less, just because of the nature of the blend. But we ended up, back ordered for like 2 months on Blue Toros and Blue Gordos, and it's kind of continued that way. So we're now to the point where we've gotten production up, and we shouldn't be running into back order problems with the existing product lines we have. And we've hopefully learned from those mistakes, and with the new product coming out, we don't end up in that situation again.
Right. It's fascinating that, some of the interviews lately, we've been kind of just keeping the blends. We're going to get a chance to talk about the blends, but we talk about the business of it, where the retailers depend so much on you guys, obviously, so they can get the sticks. And when you launch new products, it's you gotta have a almost like an even keel, because it's not like you can just say, okay, well, we'll put 10,000 more cigars in production and they'll be ready to go. There's a time component that actually takes for excellent cigars, And
Sure.
There's been a ton of brands out there that just push it out, and when it gets to the consumer's hands, it always happens like, wow, it's a good stick, but it just needs more time. Right. So it sounds like you're really trying to find that balance there, so you don't get caught within that matrix again, and that can be a struggle. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
the issue for us, I think, and me specifically, is that it's a cash flow issue. If I dedicate a whole bunch of resources, meaning cash, to new product, I'd much rather have too much of it than too little of it, because the signature line, it ages incredibly for 2-3 years. I mean, the stuff that I have from the original production is smoking incredibly now. And the blue, just because the nature of that blend, it also ages really, really well. So I'd rather have too much of it than too little of it, but tying up that much cash and having a whole bunch of product in the hopes that it's successful in the marketplace is a challenge, because we got to try to utilize cash flow to promote the brands, to pay our reps, to get the production that we have, or the lines that we have in production currently, to make sure we still got enough of those. So it's just a process, kind of a juggling act, if you will.
I was going to say it's certainly a balancing act.
Find a balance for a well-balanced cigar, for sure.
Well, that's where I was going next. So first of all, Joe D and I lit up the Brown Label HR, which is the signature Toro, and it's phenomenal.
Great. I've got a box sitting in my humidor that I've had over a year now, and it smokes incredibly well. It obviously with a different price point of $20, but it's it's a special stick, very well balanced, flavorful for days.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's I'm getting a real phenomenal leather component from this. Really, a little bit of wood. It's if you find these out within your local tobacconist, you gotta just scoop them up and sit on them or have one now and sit on them if you're a collector. I'm not.
They're ready.
Like Spence sent a pack. I can tell you,
for sure, but
I can tell you, Spence, everything you sent from my portion will be gone by Thursday of this week. That's just the way I am. You know what I mean?
Joe's got happy hands. He's gonna get in there.
I do. And then we will get to some of this other kind of non-labeled stuff that you had sent us as well. And even that, like, even from you telling me the story and that you're going to tell the Stogie Geeks listen to the story, there'll be a lot of Stogie Geeks listeners saying, you should save that. Nope. That is next. That stick is next. For sure. Do you have a question for Spence?
Yeah, Spencer. You touched on it the previous time you were on the show, episode 129. Just the market penetration versus finding the right shops, not overextending. The HR is a different stick. Might not be for everybody, but it certainly has its place, and it's a special stick, in my opinion. Where are you at with the HR now? That market penetration 2 years later, after the fact. I'm curious.
Well, we were with the previous distributor when I did that interview, and then since then we've taken on our own distribution, and there was some issues with lawsuits and claims for the rights to the trademarks and yada yada yada. So it was kind of it kind of went to sleep for a little while.
Okay.
The factory stopped sending product to that previous distributor for some time prior to announcing that they were no longer doing business with them, and so the only product that was in the market for 6-8 months was product that had come from that previous distributor. So some retailers at that point decided not to get involved because of the issues with the lawsuit, and they were being sent letters, and it was kind of a mess. But we were able to settle the lawsuit prior to the IPCPR 2016.
Good.
and move forward from there. In terms of the penetration, we don't have a whole lot more accounts than we did then, but the accounts that we have specifically we have more accounts, but in terms of account activity and the turns and things like that, it's still kind of the same core group that understood it from the beginning. It's a cigar that, if you light it up and you smoke it and you don't get it, then I really don't want to sell to you. And I think most of those guys we were able to get in with pretty early on.
Yep.
And the one thing that's changed is we've brought to market those 2 new blends that are at a little more accessible price points for guys that smoke, a few cigars every day. Between the range of, like, now we're at $8 to $12 for those.
Mm-hmm. Take us through that's the new blend that you're going to release just after the first of the year. Is that correct?
No, those are the ones that we came out with in at the trade show in 2016.
Okay.
So all we had in the marketplace when I first took over this distribution in like January of 2016 was the HR Signature product. So in order to capture a larger piece of the market and kind of hit more of that sweet spot that retailers have, we came out with the Blue line and the Claro that are differentiated products from the Signature line in terms of price point as well as in terms of blends. I think for the guys that enjoy the Signature line, I think that the Blue is probably more in that same sort of wheelhouse in terms of strength and body. And the Claro is a little bit more of a delicate kind of nuanced cigar, more of a Cuban style in terms of flavor and strength profile. But we just wanted to be able to penetrate a bigger part of the market, and I liked both blends a lot. You know, I mean, I was integral in the blending process. Not to say I'm sitting down at a rolling table and putting blends together, but in terms of understanding what the market wanted, as well as what it is that I like to smoke, I think we did a really good job on both of those blends, and both of them have been really successful in the marketplace. And kind of one of the goals too with bringing out the new stuff was to help the Signature line get more turns on it, because anytime you have one line of cigars in these expansive humidors that exist in a lot of these brick and mortars, and at most at the time we only had four sizes. We didn't have the Corona out yet. We launched that in 2016 at the trade show, and we didn't have the A, which we launched at the trade show as well in 2016. So having four boxes at most sitting on a shelf in a humidor that has, you know, however many facings, they kind of sit there on an island. And the only stores that were really doing significantly well with it were stores that the manager or the owner or whomever was working the humidor was putting in the hands of their customer base. And I didn't see a lot when I talked to retailers. There wasn't a lot of people that were going to that cigar on their own. They were being led to that cigar, and then in those shops it was doing really well. And there's a certain smoker that spends $20+ a cigar. He's not everybody, and so you're only able to lead the certain number of guys to it. And to be honest, a lot of stores just they don't hand sell cigars. So for us, stores that do hand sell cigars are a target of ours. Stores that understand how good that product is, and understand who to sell it to. You know, You're not going to take a guy that's going in there looking for a $6 smoke and say, "Hey, you have to try this cigar." You know, I mean, that's not the guy. So it's a limited market. So for us to come out with new product, what it did was it allowed somebody that had heard of HR, that had heard good things about it, because man, the reviews we've gotten on that cigar pretty much across the board have been, I think the lowest we've gotten is like a 92, 93 for the most part. So we wanted guys to be able to walk in and say, man, I really want to try that cigar, but it's a $20 cigar. So let me try this Blue Label that at the time was $7 to $10. Now it's $8 to $11. Let me try that. And so if they try that cigar and they realize how good it is, then, how good does that $20 cigar have to be? So we've seen a spike in sales on the Signature product with the entrance of the other two lines.
It's actually a good entry-level product, and you bring up a good point business-wise. I used to own a retail shop in the Providence Metro, and I worked in a retail shop 18 months ago for about 2 years prior to that. And, the $6, $7 cigar smoker can be introduced to a $20 smoke. However, you from the retail standpoint, since you said, and I 100% agree with you, not all shops work the humidor. First of all, if you don't have an employee who doesn't work the humidor, you got to get rid of the employee, right? I don't care how big or small the shop is. But, you know, if you take a $6 cigar smoker and say, hey, listen, I understand you normally get this product, but let me tell you something. If you have a special occasion coming up, this is what you want. If you want to treat yourself to that, this is what you want. And it's amazing how if you leave it at that, in their mind, the consumer will say, it's Father's Day. Yep. I'm going for it. Or, you know something? My son just accomplished this milestone. Or my daughter just, she just got an A on her report card. And they'll splurge. But again, it's amazing to me how the local retailer does not even enforce that on their craft. You know what I mean?
Too, out of Spencer. So, to coin the hockey phrase, that net front presence, that presence on the shelf. So now you've coupled, the blue and the Claro with the HR. Hopefully, those consumers will migrate through all three and up and down, and certainly having that presence on the shelf of the three, and then wherever you go from the future as well. But it's going to pop and it'll stick out, And I had to throw that in there because I know you're a Canadians fan. I've had to hit my Rangers gear today and throw it out there. Had to send the message right out of the gate for
you. Canadians aren't very good. Yeah, it's
tough season,
I got
man.
into
Tough
hockey fairly recently. I mean, I've only been into hockey for maybe 6-7 years because my wife's from Montreal and her dad's a big Canadians guy, so I got into the Canadians that way. But I enjoy the sport a lot more than I ever thought I would.
Nice.
I'm seeing the Canadians play in March. I'm slated to see that. We got the Montreal Canadians over at the Boston Bruins and whatnot. So we got a buddy of mine has season tickets. So I've never been to like a Canadian, but I've always heard that I'm in for a treat.
You're in for a treat, and even more so if you can get to Montreal for a game. Even if you're the one time I had gone probably about 7 years ago. Last row, all the way up, nosebleed. Every single fan is standing the entire game, chanting. It's nuts. It's absolutely
I'm so looking forward to that
spiritual experience.
Yeah, you have a question?
I just wanted to, Spencer, if you could. The previous interview kind of touched a nerve for me there. You were speaking on the struggles of deploying a new product on the shelves and just that. At that time, the confidence that weighs in and out. I myself have just get into the cigar biz, from a rep capacity, and I've experienced some of those ups and downs and the questioning yourself back and forth. It just really hit a nerve, and I feel you're a pretty grounded individual that seen a lot in the biz so far. And if you could just speak on that maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so I started first as a rep in the business with AJ, and I was the first in-house rep hired by AJ Fernandez, and starting that was effectively a new line in the marketplace at the time, the San Latano line. We had just launched the Oval at the trade show in 2011, and so I was involved with that from pretty much the beginning of getting that product launched, and there were some challenges associated with that because most of the retailers at the time that were familiar with AJ were familiar with the stuff that he had done through CI with their private label stuff, the Man of Wars and the Diesels and all that. And so it was kind of a slippery slope coming in as a newbie and wanting the retailer to know who this guy was. And then they'd ask about him and you'd have to say, well, he does this for CI and does this for CI. And at the time, I think there was a little more of a stigma attached with retailers as to the online sales, and I think that's waned a bit since then. So the market has changed. You used to hear the question at IPCPR pretty regularly, are you selling online?
Mm-hmm.
And the question wasn't really, are you selling online? I mean, that's how they'd phrase it, but ultimately what they meant was, are you selling to CI or JR or Thompson or Famous,
Right.
And because if you said, yeah, I'm selling to Serious Cigars and he has an online presence, and I'm selling to Corona Cigars and he's got an online presence, they didn't care. They just wanted to hear that you weren't selling to the big guys. And I haven't heard that question nearly as often as I used to. And in reality, whether this rubs people the wrong way or not, most of the people that had the biggest issue with you selling to those guys were accounts that just, they didn't order that much.
Yeah.
They'd want to know whether or not you were selling to them. So I went into launching the HR product for Cubanacan, and when they were the distributor of it. And my stance at that point, following my experience with AJ, was this is a product for brick and mortar alone, and we're not going to sell this online. And it was a mistake, in my opinion, looking back on it. And we've changed our stance since, and now we're supported a lot by a lot of the online guys. We're supported by brick and mortars as well, and but most of the brick and mortars that do really well with our product, they could give a shit whether or not we sold online.
Yeah, that is a mouthful right there.
Yep.
Of that, online is certainly here to stay, number one, and the smaller retailers need to figure that component out of their business real quick, because
they just got to add value.
Yep.
Ultimately, they need to add value in a way that the online guys are going to have a difficult time doing it, just based on the nature of the model. I mean, online guys can provide really good customer service, but they're not going to be able to, at the level of a brick and mortar, be able to know the person, be able to know what their palate is, to be able to know what's going on in their life, to be able to have a real relationship with that person is much more difficult.
That's where it starts, man. You got to build that from the ground up.
Right. Now you
need stores to understand that.
Right. You recently went to Esteli, and were you babysitting these unlabeled ones?
Yeah, I brought those
the
back.
58 ring gauges. So you were babysitting these. Are these available? Are these coming out? Can you talk to us about this plan? And can you talk to us about your trip to Esteli, if you want to give the Stogie Geeks listener a kind of run through of your day?
Yeah. So
what's it like to go to a factory?
Well, I go to a number of them. So every time I'm in Esteli, I go to pretty much every time I'm in Esteli, I go see AJ. Just to pay my respects, because he's the guy that got me in the business, and I've known AJ a long time. We got a great relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I go see Skip Martin, because Skip Martin is, I've known him longer pretty much than everybody else I've known in the industry. He was my retailer in Galveston from like 2005 until 2008, when Hurricane Ike hit my house and hit their store. So I go see both those guys every time I'm in. But my average day in Esteli, or my average day coming in, I usually get in late at night into Managua, and then I'll stay at the Camino Real there in Managua and rent a car the next morning, and then drive to Esteli. It's about 2.5 hours up the mountain, depending on how many trucks there are going 25 kilometers an hour with like black smoke pillaging out of them.
Love it. I love the visual.
It's a blast, man. It really is. I mean, people think I'm crazy. I am crazy, but I like driving there, man. I really enjoy it. It's like I compare it to Grand Theft Auto, or like a shopping mall during Christmas, where there's like somewhat of a design. You're supposed to be on the right side, but maybe you're on the left, and maybe you're crossing through people, and it's just kind of madness, and I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun for me. And then I'll get into Esteli, and I'll go straight to the factory and work with Omar, and spend most of my day there. And then at night, I'm usually hanging out with Skip over at Skip's house, and just smoking cigars and seeing the baby. And then I'll make a day to go see AJ, and sometimes we'll go look at the farms. And AJ's really proud of the monster he's built there. And so I get to see the farms, and I get to see the factory again, and I get to, it's like, hey, AJ, I've seen all this before, but if you want to take me, I'll go.
Right. I'm sure just cruising around a factory is not a bad day of work either, especially if you made the voyage over there.
It's a man. I enjoy seeing different people and how different people do things, and AJ's got a behemoth of an organization at this point. He's gotten to where he's doing like 90,000 cigars a day between the factory in Esteli and the new one in Ocotal. I haven't gone to that one yet up north, but then you've got somebody like Skip Martin, and I think Skip's doing like 1.2 million cigars a year out of his factory, and then we're doing somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 500,000 out of our cigar factory. So it just kind of varies from year to year. We're trying to grow that. I think our capacity is somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 million cigars a year. So we're trying to grow our side of it, and then we're doing some projects for other people. We do Bello Terra and Singer and Monk for the guys from Cigar Art in Dallas, and when we're doing the Sereno stuff for Carson and Tony Sereno. But we're trying to grow that a bit, the production on our end. But it's neat seeing different operations and how they work. And I'm always I'm an observer, and I like to see, different ways to skin a cat, to use a term that we use down here in Texas a bit.
Sure.
Skip runs a hell of a clean operation, really, really well organized, super efficient. And AJ does as well. And I think you have to, when you're at that level, to create cigars with the quality that he has, with the volume that he's producing out of that factory. It's got to be an efficiently run operation with a number of key individuals in key positions to manage things, so AJ doesn't have to micromanage. But both of those guys are similar in that they work really, really hard. They put a lot of time in. I mean, AJ's out and about at 6:30 in the morning and not back until 6:37 at night. So, and Skip's hours are a little flipped, but nonetheless, he puts in a bunch of work down there, and I've learned a lot from both of those guys.
Awesome. Take us through these unlabeled cigars right before we let you go here. Well, what did you send us? I'm looking at, more specifically, looks like it's a 58 ring gauge cigar. What is this
so
that we're going to
ring
smoke
gauge.
for the second segment?
Yeah, that one is, it was going to be called Alejo. I'm not sure if that's what we're going to call it or not, but more than likely it'll be called that. But we'll probably come out with that one at the trade show. That will be one that will be released at the trade show. The other one is one that we can't bring to market because it's something that we just play around with down in the factory. It was something they made for me because I wanted to, once I found out how much Cuban tobacco we had, I wanted to try it, and Luis Omar Gonzalez's son was like, man, it's really strong tobacco. And I said, well, I just roll up a little cheroot of it and let me smoke it, little purito. And he's like, man, it's too strong. Let me put some like Jalapa Seco in there. I was like, no, I just want to taste it. I don't care how strong it is. And so he rolled it up for me, and I'm sitting down, and I've drawn it like 10 times. And I'm like, and I'm retrohaling it, and it's not, doesn't have that bite to it, doesn't have that pepper, that power that you usually taste with heavy nicotine tobacco. And it just was really dark and sweet and chewy. And I was like, man, it's really not that strong. I mean, I'm throwing it through my nose without a problem. And,
Right.
And I stand up, and I'm like, oh shit! Like it grabbed me a little bit, and then it definitely is really strong tobacco. But,
true story, Spencer. Today I got to the studio about 12:15, and I received your package, and that you had sent, and ironically, that was the first cigar that I already cut and lit. Right? Yeah. I was like, I'm gonna smoke this little one. This is great. And I smoked it, and I'm like, wow, it's smooth. Yeah. It's classic taste. And I'm like, I'm trying to go through my Rolodex. I'm like saying, okay, this is not a market. I haven't seen it yet. I'm having it. And then I caught up with Joe D next door to do some prep for our next segment. And when I got up to come now to the studio, it's only like within walking distance, right? Like it's the next suite over. But I got up and I was like, whoa, okay.
Hold on.
Like, wait a minute. What the heck did I just have? That's why I asked you. And offline, true story for the Stogie Geeks listener, I said, what's up with these little ones? Like, yeah, you can't get those. Like, so, leave it to me to, I got this exclusive thing. It's gone already. Gone. I'll give one to Paul. I'll give one to Joe D. I won't hold them all to myself.
I appreciate that.
But, it's already gone. Like, it's... So my reputation holds true.
There it is.
I'm kind of stealing from Skip a little bit with that cigar, just because it's something that, for the most part, you either have to know me pretty well or you have to come down to the factory to get access to it. So it just encourages people to come down and see what we do down there, because I think we do run a really special operation. We got like 12 pairs, and most of them are married couples, which is kind of interesting. But it's just a reason to come see us down at the factory. And now I think that more and more gringos have traveled down to Esteli and feel really comfortable in the country of Nicaragua because it is really a safe country outside of some goofy petty theft stuff that happens like around Managua and San Juan del Sur, where there's, more concentration of Americans with money that are flashing eye watches or whatever, and then
Sure.
kind of appear that they've got something. It's a really safe place to travel. And I think more and more gringos are getting comfortable going down there and kind of doing tours on their own, where they're not doing these captive tours like a Perdomo tour or an AJ Fernandez tour, or, something where they're kind of captive to that particular manufacturer. More guys are comfortable going down to Esteli and staying at Los Arcos or Hex and then going, touching base with somebody like me or somebody like Skip, who's down there pretty much full time, or AJ, and going by their factory, or Casa Fernandez or Plasencia, or the list goes on and on of the different manufacturers that are down there that pretty much have an open door policy as long as you reach out to them to show. Everybody's proud of what they're doing, so we want to show guys what it is we're doing down there. And I think if I was a consumer, I still am a consumer, but if I was just a consumer, I'd like to go down there and see different operations, just a lot of guys that are really into this from a consumer level kind of thing have been to Honduras, to Christian's place back in the day, or to his new place at CLE, or they've been to Dominican on trips, they've been to Esteli for trips. But doing it on your own, I think, is just a lot more interesting, at least to me, to be able to see different operations and kind of run at my own pace. And there's plenty of good places to eat and plenty of things to do in the cigar world. When you're in Esteli, you can easily eat up 4 or 5 days, seeing factories and going to see farms and doing anything you want to do. And most of the factories are open to that sort of thing and sharing what it is they do with these consumers that are interested enough to get down there.
Mm-hmm. Jody?
Nice. Spencer, I just want to change gears lastly real quick. The hurricane down there in Houston, were you directly affected at all? And where does the city stand right now?
The city's recovered extraordinarily well and extraordinarily fast, I think, relative to some other places that have been affected as drastically as Houston was. We were affected in that we didn't have access to our warehouse for several days, but I was actually, I think this was a couple of weeks after I'd seen Joe in Boston. I had come back to Houston, and then I had gone up to New York and like Philly and all that, touring with my rep up there. And then my wife and kids were in Montreal. They had come up to New York with me, and then they went on to Montreal to see her family. And so when the hurricane hit, I was just kind of stuck. I couldn't get back to Houston. So I just went up and met them. I went to Chicago for a meeting, and then I went up to Ottawa and met them in Ottawa and saw some of their family. And we just floated around Canada for like maybe 5-6 days until we could get back into Houston, and then came back. So we were just shut down for a little while. We were blessed in that our house wasn't flooded. We didn't get any water in our house. A bunch of our friends, weren't as lucky as we. And then the factory or the warehouse here was fine.
Mm-hmm.
Good
Awesome,
to hear, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you. You've answered so many questions within this short interview here. I really appreciate it. You've answered what the future holds for your company. You're getting some new fascinating products that are coming out. One in January, one in IPCPR. You've answered my favorite question: what are your challenges over there? As far as a business standpoint, did you see any other interviews that I did? Because you kind of came prepared. You kind of came prepared.
It strikes me as a very even keel individual. Is that voice does not change, man. That's like a perfectly made for a sleep aid or something. Just
it was
made for radio, man. You get something going on there.
It was awesome. If you have any press releases that you want to get out to the Stogie Geeks listeners or whatever, please email me at joeh@stogiegeeks.com. I'll get it out to the listeners, because we're collecting a database and stuff like that, and let them know, what's going on with some of your new releases. And if you could circle back with us maybe around January when you launch that new product, it would be great to hear from you.
Will do.
All right.
For sure.
Thank you for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
That was Spencer Drake.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Stay tuned. We have a Stogie Geek segment. We'll be right back.